Good morning. It is Friday. Thank God it's Good Friday. And this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star Spangled Banner, we will have talk show and no free lunch. Chapter 2 of the book, finishing up Chapter 2 of the book, The Collapse of Parenting, and meeting Mrs. Barber. All that and more when I get back. Thank you. And now the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for April 15th, break and divide every demonic confederacy. I will not be silent when those who hate me have lifted up their heads and taken crafty counsel against my people. They have consulted together against my children and put a confederacy in place to cut you off so that you will be remembered no more. I will deal with them as I dealt with the enemies of the Israelites, and they will become a refuse on the earth. They will be like the whirling dust and the chaff that blows before the wind. I will cause them to be confounded and dismayed forever, and I will put them to shame that they may perish. For my name alone is the Lord, and I am the Most High over all the earth. Psalm 83. Prayer declaration. Father, I break and divide every demonic confederacy against my life in the name of Jesus, and I lose confusion into every demonic confederacy directed against my life, family, and church. Persecute them with your tempest and make them afraid of your terrible storm. Let them be confounded and troubled forever. Let them be confused and attack each other until they perish. Amen. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for April 15th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you. Thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you. Thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you. Thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, a constitutional amendment banning abortion throughout the country. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liability to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. Number nine, a flexible minimum wage. Number 10, means-tested health care. And number 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you. Thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Number one, bring back not-for-profit news. Number two, defeat the cult of promiscuity with the promotion of privacy. Number three, defeat the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number four, defeat the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number five, defeat the cult of imagination, psychology, and Hollywood with religion and research. Number six, defeat the cult of reinvention by admitting one's mistakes. Number seven, defeat the cult of death, abortion, infanticide, and assisted suicide. Back in a minute. Thank you. Thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number one, they are neutral. Number two, they fail to correct their mistakes. Three, they demoralize their audiences. Number four, they contradict themselves. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Left-wing, right-wing vocabulary. The left says, going forward. The right says, from now on. The left says, homeless. The right says, squatter. The left says, migrant. The right says, fugitive. The left says, eliminate. The right says, reduce. Thank you, thank you. Now there's no free lunch, and this is a section on government spending and debt. Quote, the costs of fiscal irresponsibility have more to do with constraints on future growth and spending than with the risk of catastrophic crisis. Growing debt makes claims on the government's finances in the years to come, and so burdens the future taxpayers while limiting the options of future legislators. The problem, in other words, is that debt and interest payments will dramatically constrain the government's capacity for discretionary spending on defense, on welfare, on research, on emergency response, and will also constrain our economy's capacity for prosperity, unquote. Yuval Levin. We all intuitively know in our personal financial lives that taking on debt today, especially debt that our cash flow easily enables us to service, is not short-term catastrophic. Likewise, the debt the government takes on never feels catastrophic in the short term. Yet that is almost always how we talk about it economically, as if the dam will break tomorrow, when in reality, what excessive debt taken now does most detrimentally is dramatically hamper our future growth and flexibility. When future growth gets pulled into the present, it only means one thing: less growth in the future. We know this when we buy a living room full of new furniture in anticipation of a bonus coming next year. That bonus will now not grow our net worth next year. And we know it when the government spends future tax receipts today. The growth and flexibility of the future are handcuffed. This is mathematically and intuitively obvious. And that was, there's no free lunch. Thank you, thank you. And now the conclusion of Chapter 2 of the book, The Collapse of Parenting, How We Hurt Our Kids When We Treat Them Like Adults. You can already see several ways in which the culture of disrespect might result in more fat kids. When kids don't respect parental authority, they are less likely to eat their vegetables. They are less likely to do chores and more likely to play video games. They are less likely to go to sleep when they should and more likely to stay up late in front of a screen. But there's also some intriguing evidence that appears to support a direct link. The child who's most disrespectful is also the child who is most likely to become fat. In the past 2 decades, quite a few studies have reported that finding, namely that children and teenagers who are defiant, disrespectful, and just plain bratty are more likely to become overweight or obese compared with kids who are better behaved. Turns out to be a big effect. In one study, researchers found that kids who were chronically defiant and disrespectful were about 3 times more likely to become obese compared to kids who were better behaved. And the slimmer the child, the bigger the effect. Slender kids who were persistently defiant and disrespectful were more than 5 times as likely to become obese compared with equally slender kids who were better behaved. It makes sense. If kids are being defiant or disrespectful and refusing to eat their vegetables, some American parents will let them have pizza and French fries for supper. Those parents won't say, no dessert until you eat your vegetables. Those parents may find it easier to give the child pizza and ice cream rather than to take a stand if the child is prone to misbehave. Why is the effect more pronounced for slender kids? If a child is already overweight when the study begins, then there's not as much room to see a big change. If a child is slender and then becomes obese, the researchers will find a bigger effect among slender children than among kids who are already overweight or obese. Now here's the surprise. This relationship between bad behavior now and obesity later, confirmed in many studies conducted in the United States, may not hold in New Zealand. Only one prospective study on this topic has been performed in New Zealand, but in that one study conducted in the 1990s, girls who misbehaved were somewhat less likely to become obese compared with better behaved girls. Boys were not studied. The researchers speculated that the badly behaved girls in New Zealand might weigh less than good girls because the bad girls were more likely to smoke cigarettes. I'm not persuaded by that conjecture. Bad girls are more likely to smoke cigarettes than good girls in the United States, just as in New Zealand. I propose a different hypothesis based on my conversations with parents and teens across New Zealand, in Auckland, Hastings, Hawke's Bay, and Christchurch. Parents there have told me that, at least in the 1990s, it would have been unusual for a parent to allow a daughter or son to decide what's for supper. If parents in New Zealand prepared a healthy meal and happened to have a defiant and disrespectful daughter who refused to eat it, then that girl might go to bed hungry, which over a period of months or years might cause her to lose some weight. However, this New Zealand study was published in 1998 based on research done in the mid-90s. There have been some changes in the 2 decades since. When I recently shared this research with an administrator at a school I visited in Christchurch, she said that she had observed an increased sense of entitlement with some young people in recent years. In post-earthquake Christchurch, the level of adolescent anxiety and associated mental health issues may have compounded this sense of entitlement. Parents and professionals alike seem to be walking on eggshells when concerning themselves with adolescent well-being, and this fear seems to manifest itself in some overindulged teenagers operating with increased levels of autonomy. Confused parents are turning more and more to schools for guidance on how to manage disrespect and defiance in the home. So maybe we all need some help. In part 2 of the book, we will focus on concrete strategies to build your authority in the context of contemporary 21st century culture. But those strategies will be effective only if you begin with confidence about what you are trying to teach your child. Here's what you need to teach with respect to diet and exercise. Eat right. Broccoli and Brussels sprouts come before pizza and ice cream. Eat less. Don't supervise. Prepare small servings and insist the kids finish everything on the plate, including vegetables, before they get second helpings. Exercise more. Turn off the devices. Go outside. Play. We can do this. Back in a minute. Thank you. When parents abdicate authority and let kids decide what's for supper, one result is more kids eating pizza and French fries instead of broccoli and cauliflower. That's certainly one factor contributing to the rise in overweight and obesity among children and teens today. It's easy to see how letting kids decide might lead to more kids who are overweight, but other important consequences are not so obvious. For example, it's not immediately obvious how the decline in parental authority might lead to more kids being diagnosed with ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder or pediatric bipolar disorder, especially in the United States. But the link is there. That's our next topic. And that was Chapter 2, how it is that our children become overweight. And next time we're going to be reading Chapter 3, why are so many kids or children on medication? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Chapter 15 from the book Tales from My Bicentennial Year, about a family living in upstate Gansevoort, New York, in the Adirondacks, and told from the perspective of a 10-year-old boy named Mike. Chapter 15, Meeting Mrs. Barber. Today was going to be our first real football day after school. All the way home on the bus, we were in a football frenzy. The Third Streeters had challenged us to a game on Thanksgiving Day, and we needed to get ready. I was always the quarterback, mainly because I could throw a country mile. In my mind, I was Roger Staubach and huge Gene Tidwell was Golden Richards. My dad hated that we all liked the Cowboys. We were in New York Giants territory, and he was a Giants fan. He could not understand our worship of the Cowboys. After school, we were going to meet up out in my backyard, even though it was set up as a baseball field. In the fall, we converted it to a football field. We ran chalk lines down the side. We ran the field so that the end zones were by my house and then across into the 3rd Street backyard of the half-finished house. My dad even built us a goalpost for kicking field goals into. It was just a couple of 2x4s with one nailed across the 2 others, kind of like a big letter H. 2 guys had to hold it up since we moved it from end zone to end zone. We even had a first down marker. We took 2 sticks and tied a 10-foot piece of string to each end. And if you moved it that far, you got a first down. I ran into my front door to get changed out of my school clothes when my mom grabbed me by the shirt collar. What did I do? I thought to myself, quickly searching my mind for what trouble I could possibly be in. There were a couple of thoughts I had real quick. It could be that I hadn't taken the garbage out yet, or that I had picked on my sisters this morning. Instead, she handed me the phone. You need to call Father H. He wants you to come to the church and help him with something. I could not believe it. Trouble would have been better. I could have gotten yelled at and continued out the door to play football. Instead, I'm calling Father H, and I know I'll have to go to church for something. My mom saw the look on my face and gave me the old, Thanksgiving is almost here, and right after that, it's Christmas, so you better adjust your attitude and give back. It's not money God wants, it's your time. With that, I called Father H and pedaled my bike down to the church. No football. I arrived in the church parking lot, and Father H was outside sitting on top of his tan Plymouth Fury sedan, smoking his Marlboro. He asked me the usual how you doing stuff. Then he asked me if I knew a Mrs. Barber. I said I couldn't remember her and asked him if I should. He went on to tell me that she and her husband had been part of the founders of our church many years ago. About 20 years ago, she lost her husband, Henry, and came to church every week up until about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Now she was just too old to come. She could walk and everything, but any family she had was either not talking to her or had moved away. He then dropped the bombshell on me. He wanted me to go there once a week or so and check up on her. She needed some small things done, and there was no one else to do it. What was I going to say? No? I want to say no. Heck, I wanted to run away as fast as I could and go play football. But I knew there would be severe punishment for that. So my feet stayed planted. Father H told me to jump in his car, and he would take me over to meet her. It was only a half a mile or so from the church. I had passed this house probably 100 times and never really looked at it. It appeared that at one time it was a pretty nice house. But now it was all run down. Old paint was crackling on the sides of the house. The roof looked like it had seen better days, and the grass and shrubs were all overgrown. The house was a 2-story colonial. It was probably built during the colonial days. The center entrance had a screened-in porch with rips in all the screens. The side entrance next to the driveway had a smaller 3-season porch with off-kilter windows. Back in a minute. Thank you. We walked up to the side porch entrance, and Father H knocked on the door a few times. We waited a few seconds, and he knocked again. I started thinking, great, this old lady's not home, let's go. Then Father H just shook his head, opened the door, and walked in, motioning me to follow him. Darn, I thought, here we go. Hello, Father H was yelling pretty loudly. He looked back at me just standing in the doorway. Come on, Mike, she's old, she doesn't hear well, and she doesn't bite. So let's go. I followed him through the door to the porch. Then, stepping over newspapers and other odds and ends, we made our way to the inside door. He banged, not knocked, on this door. Bang, bang, bang. Then he just turned the knob, and in we went again. This porch leads us into her kitchen. This was right out of some old movie. Big giant sinks, large refrigerator, and a large wooden table that looked like it had been handmade by a large man. There at the big old table sat Mrs. Barber. "Father H., nice to see you. I kept telling you to come in. You can stop yelling hello now," she said. She was just sitting there listening to old music on this giant radio that sat at the table. The radio was the size of and looked like our church. I stepped back a bit, almost behind Father H. I got a good look at her. She was about 960 years old, I thought. She smelled old. The house smelled old. I was convinced she was the oldest person in the world. She had curly gray hair, silver wire-frame circular glasses. Her face looked like my old catcher's mitt, all pudgy with lots of wrinkles and knots on it. She was a big-boned lady, not old and frail-looking, but old and mean-looking. She was wearing about 12 aprons on top of an old gray dress and had huge black shoes. Sitting in front of her, next to the table, was her walker. She just kind of sat there looking at me as I stooped behind Father H. looking at her. Father told her who I was and who my parents were. She said she knew my mom. Father H. explained to her that I would come by and see her one day a week or so to see what she needed and to help her out. She reached out her hand, pointed her finger in my direction, and said, "What's your name again?" "Mike," I said. "Well, Mr. Mike, don't you shake hands when you meet somebody? Don't you say hello when you meet someone?" She yelled out at me. "Yes, yes," I said. "Nice to meet you," I said as I reached out my hand to shake hers. "Well, good," said Father H. "Now you both know each other." He then told Mrs. Barber that whenever she needed something, to call Mike's mom, and she would send me down. We went on about how he promised my mom to get me home for dinner tonight, and that it was getting dark, and we'd better be going. We said goodbye to her and managed to get out of the house and into his car. He said he would give me a ride home. I reminded him that we would have to put my bike in the trunk. We did all that, and as we were heading into my house, I thought to myself, wait a second. We went from helping her when she needed it to once a week to whenever she needed something. What was I in for? The next day at school was a long one. The last day before a vacation was always a long one. We now had 5 days off from the school for Thanksgiving. We got off the bus and started walking home. The bus dropped off and picked up the entire town of Gansevoort kids at the post office. We were a good half-hour bus ride from the school. We all had a mile or so walk back home from there. It wasn't so bad in the spring and fall, but in the winter, it was a cold, long walk home. Today wasn't so bad out. A little chill in the air, perfect for our football practice that we had to have since last night was a no-go because of the whole Mrs. Barber thing. The guys got together and played, not for very long. We pretty much ran home so that we could get some practice in before dinner. Then, a repeat of yesterday. As soon as I hit the stairs to come into the house, my mom yelled out the front door, "Leave your books on the porch and get on your bike and go see Mrs. Barber's. She has already called 5 times for you." Mom knew I wanted to play ball this afternoon, and I think she generally felt a little bad for me. "Just hurry and go and get back and you can play ball. We'll eat supper late tonight because your dad won't be home till later. Go on, hurry up." And with that, I was off. I pedaled as fast as I could, passing by huge Jean's and Brad's house as they were coming out to play, kind of looking at me like, where the heck are you going? I rode past the church and wheeled right up to Mrs. Barber's side porch door. I knocked, and no answer. I knocked again, no answer. So just like Father H., I walked right in. I got to the inside door and repeated the process. But before I opened the door, I thought to myself, heck, you came here, you knocked, no answer, just go home fast and say there was no one home. But I thought better of that idea and turned the doorknob and walked in. There she was, standing there, and she says to me, "What, don't you knock on a person's door? You just walk in? Didn't your parents teach you any manners?" "I was coming. Didn't you see me standing here?" "Yes, ma'am, my parents did teach me manners. I'm sorry, I thought you couldn't hear me." We got past that, and she asked me to take care of a few little things. She had a little list she had written down. "Well, let's see here. First, let's have you replace the light bulb over my reading chair," she ordered. First, I thought, doesn't she realize I have things to do? The word first usually implies there's a second and possibly a third thing to do. But anyways, back in a minute. Thank you. I found the light bulbs under her gigantic kitchen sink and replaced the one in her lamp. The lamp was kind of cool. It had a marble base to it and a sleek, weathered-looking brass pole with leaves and things imprinted on it. And on top it curled over to a glass cover that was shaped like a flower. Second, she said, I need you to take out the garbage. No problem. I thought I do that all the time. She pointed me to her garbage can in the kitchen. I took out the full bag. She pointed under the sink, where I saw the box of new bags, and put one in the container. The big garbage can is outside that back door, she said. I looked out the back of the kitchen, and there was another little porch with a door to the outside. So I headed back there, flipped the light switch so I could see, and then I screamed like a baby does. Ah! Jesus, Mary, and Joseph's son, what the hell is wrong? She started yelling at me. Right in front of me, hanging on the door to the outside, was an arm with a hook on it. Yes, just like Captain Hook's hand. A claw and a rusty old hook on the end of an arm that was hanging on the door. That's just Henry's hand, she said, like it was normal to have your dead husband's hook hand hanging on the door. She explained that he lost his real hand under a train. He had been a railroad engineer for the Central Hudson Railway his entire life after the big war. One day, while working on something under the train, he got his hand stuck and the train rolled right over his arm. The way she explained it was that she loved him and was happy to have him, hook and all. To me, that was all very sweet, but who would hang that thing up for 20 years? I finished up line items 3 through 27 on her list and was getting ready to go when Mrs. Barber asked me a question. How much do I owe you? She said. My mom had already warned me. Plus, I could never take any money from her. That was just how we were. I told her nothing. It was my pleasure. This was like an insult to her. She demanded to pay me something. We Barbers have always paid our way, and I will not have it any other way now. So, what do I owe you? I simply said, I have no idea. You give me whatever you think it's worth, okay? Okay, she said. She stood there with all of her aprons on and holding her walker with one hand, while fishing around inside a little change purse. She finally pulled out a bright, shiny nickel. Yes, people, 5 cents. I don't care how long ago this was, 5 cents was nothing then, and it's like nothing now. It really didn't matter to me at all. Really, it was just kind of funny. 5 cents. Mrs. Barber became a part of my life from 5th grade until I went to college. I mowed her lawn, painted her house, cleaned up her shrubs, cleaned out rooms. Went to the market for her. Heck, when I turned 16, she bought a car for me. I got there one day to do whatever for her, and there was an old Buick Riviera in her driveway. Her driveway had not seen a car in it since the old Henry passed away. I asked her what the car was doing there. She says, oh, it's yours. I bought it and had them bring it here for you. Now you can take me to the market and the stores and my doctor's appointments. I was kind of liking the idea of having a car, but I knew this was not going to fly with Pops. Back in a minute. Thank you. I got home and told Pops about it, and he went back over with me to Mrs. Barber's. All the way over, he was saying, nobody gives my son a car but me. You don't even have a license yet. Who's carrying the insurance? You don't think these things through. I just said, Pops, this isn't me. Talk to her. I had nothing to do with it. She looked like she was going to cry when old Pops told her no. I'm pretty sure Dad made arrangements to get the car back to wherever she bought it. When I left for college, she became my brother Kevin's responsibility. And you know what? I don't think she ever noticed it wasn't me. We both looked alike, and by that time she was really, 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 really old. I think my brother had to do a lot more of old people taking care of stuff. She passed away when I was in the Air Force, long after Father H. passed away too. I never made the funeral because I was gone. She did give me one thing that I did not understand when she gave it to me, but makes sense now. A little red prayer Catholic prayer book, which on the inside she wrote, "To Michael, a true friend, Marion Barber." If you flip through the book, she circled one prayer. God of love, I thank you for the people in my life who are easy to love. I thank you for my families and friends who understand my actions, who support me in my decisions, and whose presence can lift the burden of a thorny day. Help me with those who are difficult to love, when they ignore me or try to bend me to their will. Let me recognize their flaws and their dangers, but then let me remember your attitude toward them and lead me to see them in the light of your love. Amen. Amen, Mrs. Barber. We miss you. And that was Meeting Mrs. Barber, chapter 15 of from the book Tales from My Bicentennial Year. And next time will be chapter 16, The Turkey Bowl. Thank you, thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you, thank you. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, and reminding you to listen to the John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Also, KFI needs to bring back Brian Suits and his show, The Dark Secret Place. Hashtag bring back Brian Suits. Until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.